Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the WNW 172, the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, January 9th, 2015, the first weekly news wrap-up of the years. I know I took a couple of weeks off at Christmas and at New Year's. Thank you for supporting this site. Thank you for all your kind words and your comments on the days I just put up a cartoon and a picture and said, hey, I'm taking off. Thank you very much. First story out of the bat, the head of MI5 in the United Kingdom, it's the head of British security, is sounding the alarm that Islamic terrorists from Syria are planning more attacks on the West. Now, Andrew Parker, he's the head of MI5, he says al-Qaeda fighters, keep that in mind, al-Qaeda fighters from Syria are planning mass casualty attacks against the West. He was not specific on the targets, but he said an attack on the United Kingdom is highly probable, highly likely. Parker also said that these terrorists want to, quote, and I'll read his quote, cause large-scale loss of life, often by attacking transport systems or iconic targets. Now think about this. These are the same al-Qaeda fighters in Syria that, the West and Britain and the U.S. backed. We armed them. We voted, several months ago to give them lethal aid. And now the head of MI5 is saying that, al-Qaeda from Syria is planning, mass casualty attacks. Are we stupid? I've been harping on this, how we're arming terrorists, at least in part, and I think a large part. I mean, remember ISIS or ISIL or the Islamic State, the guys making the caliphate in Eastern Syria and Western Iraq? Those are the same people that got armed by the United States. Either by accident or on purpose. I don't know, but listen, this is a policy that Vladimir Putin laid out. And 2 weeks before, I remember talking about this a couple of weeks before the attack on the Benghazi embassy, where our ambassador and 3 more people died, where they were murdered. And, Putin came out and said something to the effect of, when you have terrorists do your bidding, it can backfire. Well, it backfired. And now it's backfiring again. Al-Qaeda fighters are planning mass casualty attacks on the West. Will we ever learn? Many law enforcement agencies in the West, including the United States, are on high alert after what happened in Paris, where Islamic radicals gunned down and killed more than a dozen people. Their target were the editors and the journalists at a satirical publication called Charlie Hebdo. That was their main target. And, many people in Europe are outraged. People in France are freaking out. They've already left these Muslim groups over there have, 75 or 80 no-go areas, where they basically have their own little country inside of France. Stupid. Outrageous. And that's what the conservative parties over there are saying, is that, hey, this is a problem. We can't ignore it any longer. And, we don't have near the problem here, but I think that problem is going to ultimately come here. I mean, everybody's so worried about Russia being our enemy, and really the real enemy is, Islamic, radical Islam. Islam likes to say that they have 1.6 million Muslims in the world, and, we're not all bad. No, they're not. They're not all bad. But let's just say 10% are wackadoodle, that want to have Sharia law and thinks that anybody who believes in God the Father, and anybody who believes in Christ as the Savior, needs to die, needs to be beheaded. If 10% of the 1.6 billion people, are whacked out and want death and destruction, it's 160 million people. This is a huge problem. A monster problem. And the president is pretty quiet on this. Unlike him coming out and and talking about Trayvon Martin, that case down there in Florida. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. I mean, that was his quote, right? Or the comments, not long after the eruption in Ferguson, Missouri, where a guy tried to grab a cop's gun and charged him, and the police officer shot and killed him. And him and Eric Holder threatening to do civil rights action, which they couldn't do because it wasn't a civil rights problem. They made up a phony, hands up, don't shoot narrative, completely phony. That, police are riding around, white police are riding around and gunning down unarmed black men. Totally false. Outrageous. And, of course, you saw what happened up in New York City with those 2 officers being murdered. Of course, That wasn't Bill de Blasio's fault. He didn't pull the trigger, the mayor of New York, and it wasn't Obama's fault. He didn't pull Holder. But listen, all that rhetoric and Al Sharpton, I mean, he's your point man. Al Sharpton's your point man on race relations. He was at the White House more than 80 times. How many people do you think got to see the president, got to go to the White House more than 80 times? Do you think the head of the CIA was there 80 times? Do you think the head of the IRS was there 80 times? Do you think the head of the Federal Reserve was there 80 times? Do you think the head of the Treasury was there 80 times? That's simply outrageous. The real problem is radical Islam, and it is going to be with us for a long time. Well, a lot of folks are celebrating the gasoline prices. I am. Listen, I like it. It's cool. I mean, wow, 2 something a gallon in the mid twos, low twos, $1.99 in some places. Woohoo! Hey, drivers will like the 2015 gasoline prices. Of course, the downside may be another financial calamity. I mean, I had Rob Kirby on First Guest of the Year saying, hey, the derivative market's going to blow. They got to make these coupon payments. There's tons of leverage in this in the shale oil business. I had David Morgan talking about just regular oil companies with a market cap of 20-something billion. A market cap of 10 or 11 billion and debt of 20-something billion. And that's with oil at 90-something, $3 a barrel. And, USA Today did get this right. Of course, they didn't mention the leverage in the oil business. Falling oil changes fortunes. You bet. And it could change some fortunes of some very big banks, like JP Morgan and Citibank. Between them, they have 135, just 2 banks. $135 billion in derivatives, and just like subprime won't be contained, it won't just be the oil derivatives and the oil debt. It won't be. When it blows, it's going to wreck the entire financial complex. It's just a matter of when. Rob Kirby says early in 15. David Morgan says 4 or 5 months, May, June, July, somewhere like that. It's going to blow. They can't make the payments. There's huge leverage in the system. And, this is why, and you wonder why it was reported, and to me it seemed like panic. So I'll just say panic. JP Morgan, Citibank panicked, calling members of Congress. You've got to get, protections for our derivative book of business that, if it goes down, whether the taxpayers, the FDIC, going to have to, bail us out. And they got that pushed through, slipped through that budget bill that went through a few weeks ago. Nobody either side of the aisle. Well, Ted Cruz on the Republican side and Elizabeth Warren on the Democrat side sounded the alarm, but they all held their nose and voted for it. Outrageous. I mean, this is, tens of trillions, if not hundreds of, 300 trillion, I've heard. Oil derivatives, 9 trillion. Derivatives in general, 300 trillion. This is huge, enormous downside. And on top of that, to make matters worse, President Obama gives an interview to National Public Radio, NPR, and in the interview he says, the oil price decline was, quote, a strategy. Oh, you mean it wasn't just supply-demand? It's a strategy, against Russia. And Obama said, hey, we looked at Russia, and the only thing, his quote, the only thing keeping that economy afloat was the price of oil. That's a stunning admission. He admitted something stunning. A couple of things. A, we manipulated the biggest commodity on the planet, oil. B, we're committing financial war against Russia. Wow, what could go wrong? I don't understand why he would do that. Was he feeling like Putin got over on him? Was he trying to say, na poo, we've wrecked the Russian economy? I'm sure there's not going to be any payback. I'm sure a former colonel in the KGB wouldn't think of a way to pay back America with their staunch ally, China, with trillions of dollars in U.S. Treasury bond debt that they're holding that they could sell. The losses on here in America and abroad are going to be enormous. I really don't understand why he would come out and gloat about wrecking a country's economy where they are a major nuclear weapon, a nuclear armed power. I don't understand that kind of that kind of politics or diplomacy. I really don't. Finally, the president is getting ready for the State of the Union address, and he's flying around the country, and he's going to be touting this wonderful economy. Let me just say what I've been saying for the last 5 years. There is no recovery. Not for Main Street. There is no recovery. Housing prices haven't recovered. The phony jobs numbers haven't really recovered. All they hired were a ton of part-time people making minimum wages. That's not recovered. We don't have income growth. That hasn't recovered. We got almost 93 million people no longer counted in the workforce. Almost 93 million. We have well over 60 million people who are either on disability or getting food stamps. The disability program will be broken in a couple of years. Sure, there's some bright spots with technology. Sure, there's a recovery on Wall Street. There's no recovery on Main Street. And yet we're pounded with this, this kind of stuff. Experts expect jobs plenty in 15. Really? Of course, they don't tell you that the jobs of plenty are 29 hours a week. They're low-wage, minimum-wage jobs, and that's the plentiful jobs that you're going to have. Something you have to have two 29-hour-a-week jobs to try to support a family if you get your wife working. Another couple of 29-hour-a-week jobs. And I got to ask you, if the economy was really so good, this is an indication, interest rates should be taken off. They should be raising interest rates. So what's happened here? Look at this right here. Treasury dips below 2%, the 10-year Treasury below 2%. Rick Ackerman said that's where he thinks he and his traders are going to say where the 10-year Treasury is going. It's going to be in the 1% land for now and a long time in the future. Bravo, Rick Ackerman. Good call. He was on also recently to talk about that. But we don't have a recovery. I'm sorry, we don't. And not if you use real numbers. I mean, if the unemployment was calculated the way Bureau of Labor Statistics did it in 1994 and earlier, we'd have a 23% underemployment rate. The housing market is doing nothing but basically bottom bouncing. We've printed tons of it. They counted in the third quarter. They revised this 5% number up to 5%. It was 3.9. They revised, and they counted the increased premiums of Obamacare as GDP. What? Another analyst is saying, hey, the fourth quarter isn't going to do so well. J.C. Penney is closing 40 stores, mostly in malls. That's not growth. Another analyst was reporting that, really the GDP is going to be about 2% in the fourth quarter. That's a stunning cliff dive from 5%. Of course, I'm sure they'll rig some numbers to raise it up, also. But listen, we don't have a recovery. I don't see how the president can brag about this wonderful economy that's based on printed money and phony numbers. Speaking of printed money, Rick from Canada sent me $50 trillion, folks. I'm wrapping it up. I'm done. I quit. I'm going to retire on the Riviera, and here it is. Here is my $50 trillion. Come on, folks. It's Zimbabwe dollars. Oh, $50 trillion. Oh, well, that goes to show you that there's the 50. Look at the number zeros on that. $50 trillion bucks. I think a piece of toilet paper is worth more than this $50 trillion bill from Zimbabwe. Thank you, Rick, for reminding me that printed money is, just printed money. When you print enough of it, it's just not even worth toilet paper. And last but not least, the other thing I wanted to bring up is I had a lovely couple in the Seattle area, Dave and Susan. I only give their last name. Wasn't clear. I didn't really get their clearance to do that, but they really lovely people. They sent me I called them on the phone when I got this. Be a child at Christmas time. So I stuck this in my CD player from, most of December and listened to Burl Ives and all these great, Christmas songs that are on here. Super. And I actually called him on his phone and said, thank you. And he said, well, you should just enjoy Christmas. I mean, you worked hard and might be the last good Christmas we have. I hope that's not true, but I really appreciate all the kind words and comments and support. And, I have the smart, I'm not just saying this to jerk your chain or to, patronize. You got smart people commenting on this site. I appreciate all your comments. Thank you for your donations. I appreciate that. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. And remember, don't let these guys scare you. Be informed. Get your house in order. Both physically and spiritually. And here's the best part, folks, the first one of 2015. Remember, fear not.